Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Planning Committee and those watching at home online. My name is Councillor Aidan Mundy. I'm the chair of the committee. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. So I have no fire drills planned for tonight here. So if you do hear the fire alarm, get out with us. So the agenda will be taken in order, and we will have a short break after P0400 or after 1.5 hours, whatever comes first. And we'll take our last bit of business at 10:30 p.m. So those in the room, please do take some water. We've got a new batch just arriving very shortly. And for those who are new to this committee or new giving their view or watching at home online, just give a very, very brief overview of the approach that will be taken. So officers will first present an application for about 5-10 minutes. And then objectors will first have an opportunity to make their case for up to 3 minutes. Then the applicant, then the ward councillors, and then officers may or may not respond to the particular points depending on the actual substance that were raised. And then we'll take questions from the floor here for officers in groups of 3. And then we'll conclude on comments and general observations. And we may need to debate, have an agreement depending on the particular subject. And then we'll move to vote on the recommendation as is on the order paper itself. Is that clear? Is that helpful? Excellent. Super. Item number 1, apologies for absences. So I've got Councillor Bim is unfortunately absent this evening, but Councillor Neveson is subbing in her place. So welcome very much. There are no other apologies. And Councillor Barlow is being subbed by Councillor McLean as well. Thank you so much for coming here this evening. And any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. It regards Blagdon Sports Ground, Beverley Way. I've spoken to legal about this. I did go to Emmanuel School, and as certainly many members will know, I've played and coached rugby there, although that finished in 2019 and the club have invited me back. It's nothing to do with this because they have moved off site and will be moving to Taunton Avenue. So I've got some historic knowledge of the site. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
No, thank you for that declaration, and I feel definitely your historic knowledge is very helpful to add to this, the weight of the argument that the committee will be hearing today. Okay, any other declarations? No? Super. Minutes from the previous meeting. Have we all read the previous minutes? Can I get someone to second the previous minutes as an accurate account? Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to the first item of business, which, as I said, is the order paper. So that's item 5. So that's Burlington Gate. Tim Lipson online, would you please introduce this item? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I will just share my screen so you can see the plans. Now, I'm afraid I've been unable to get it into a presentation mode, but you can still see the plans, and I will scroll through. So hopefully you can see one screen now, which just has a site plan on it. Please let me know if that's not the case for whatever reason.
We can see it, Tim. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. The first thing I wanted to draw to members' attention is the modification sheet. So for this application, you'll see there were some errors in terms of the floor areas given in the report. The floor areas given were based on the original plans before it was amended in December 21. So that is updated. The key difference is that the rooftop amenity space would be 83 square meters and not 69. And also the GIA, that's the internal area of some of the units, has increased, and the size of the balconies has increased in order to meet London Plan standards. Now that has changed some other aspects of the report. So on to Standard of Accommodation. Officers were content with the Standard of Accommodation as it stood, even more content at this size. And you'll see that leaves a greater amount of communal space than was under the original proposal. And if you were to equate it to each unit and divide it, it would be 5 square meters per unit. I'll come back to the modification sheet later, but just for the I wanted to draw members' attention to that change to start with. Paragraph 1.1 on page 10 outlines why the application has been brought before the committee and explains why the current proposal has not been submitted as a prior approval application for an upward extension, as the previous application on site was, which we'll come on to. So in terms of the site and surroundings, that is on page 10. You can see the application building, which is this larger building to the southern part of the site. 2 residential buildings on site currently, accommodating 34 1- and 2-bedroom flats within the 2 separate blocks. 10 flats in this block, 24 in this block. The building is 4 stories with a semi-basement car park. This is on the approach along Rothesay Avenue, the building. And again, slightly from the entrance into the site, it's a gated development. And here you can see the entrance to the basement. Bear with me. There we are. That's the building from the front, as you can see at the moment. And another view of the front, and you can see the entrance here where the other photo is taken from. This is a view towards the existing boundary fence, which will be reinstated or replaced as part of the proposals. And this is a view to the side area of the building, which is proposed to be used as amenity space, and we'll come back to this later on. And here is a more recent photo of that area. The proposal is set out on page 10 onwards. As you can see on the plans, the existing building has an existing roof terrace, which allows for communal amenity space. Here is the layout with the car park between the 2 buildings. These are all existing plans. So the existing plan with a fairly shallow pitched roof and a conservatory on top, which also accommodates the stairwell. And here you can see the neighbouring building on site. In terms of the proposal is for 3 new flats with balconies within an enlarged roofscape, which would result in an increase in ridge height of 2.2 meters, with the eaves height remaining the same as existing. A reduced size rooftop amenity space would be provided, and an area adjacent to the building would be re-landscaped to form another amenity space. So that's this area down here. The plans, which are not much different at ground floor. There are some improvements and bin stores, which I'll come on to, but the main changes are the roof extension. When this catches up, you'll be able to see the layout proposed. So 1 flat, another flat, and another flat, all dual
Tim,
aspect.
sorry, the structural flow. Could you just zoom in a little bit there?
Yeah, no problem. So 1 flat here.
Thanks.
And balcony, flat here, balcony, and then the flat here, a balcony there. Bear with me for just a moment. I will just come out again. This will be the roof plan, which will show the amenity space.
Tim, I'm afraid I can't see that. The second.
No, it's just loading, I'm afraid. I'm not sure why it's not appearing. Maybe if I come back up to it. Oh, okay, there we are. So that's the tops of the dormer windows and balconies that would be proposed. So here you can see in elevation form the new proposed roofscape. This is the stairwell overrun, featuring dormer windows. So the same eaves height, the existing building is something like that. So it's a 2.2 meter increase on the ridge height. And there from some other angles, you can see the building, and here in a section view, so you can see how the rooftop amenity space would be provided. Now, I do have one other drawing to show you, which isn't on the list because it's one that I've sort of mocked up in order to give you an idea of the difference between this scheme and the previous prior approval. So bear with me, because at first glance it looks like a printing error. The proposed scheme, as you can see with this stair overrun and the higher bit of roof, is what we're looking at the moment, this one at the back. The prior approval scheme, which was refused but notably found acceptable in terms of the impact on neighbours and the impact on the character of the area, is overlaid, which is this this one here. So the fainter one is the current proposal, and it's overlaid on the one that wasn't found objectionable in terms of neighbours or visual impact. However, this is a slightly taller proposal there. Moving on, bear with me for just a moment. So the details of the proposal are set out in the mod sheet and at paragraphs 3.1 to 3.10. As I mentioned, the plans were amended in December 2021, as it transpired that the elevations of the existing building were not accurate in regards to the roof pitch. It actually turns out that the building was not built in accordance with the original plans when it was first permitted, and it's only through the survey and for this application that was realised. And you can see an explanation of that at paragraph 3.8. In terms of consultations, that's page 14 onwards, you'll see there's a number of concerns raised on visual impact, neighbouring amenity impact, loss of communal amenity space, and general disturbance throughout the construction process, amongst other issues. In terms of consultations, transport comments have now been received and no objection is raised, subject to a permit-free Section 106 agreement. Moving on to planning considerations, and that's at page 16. The principle of development is considered acceptable, subject to the impact on the planning issues listed at paragraph 7.1.1. So moving on to those issues, visual impact, page 17. If I take us back to a site plan to talk through the rest of the proposal. Excuse me. So visual impact, page 17, it's a matter of judgment based on the principles of the relevant policies. The proposal would increase the height, scale, bulk and massing of the roofscape. However, the eaves height would remain the same as existing. The additional roof massing would have some limited impact in the street scene, but the additional bulk and massing is not considered to be harmful to the character of the area. And that's set out in more detail at page 17. In terms of the impact on neighbouring amenity at page 18, there's no additional overlooking over the existing. All windows would be in the same plane as existing. No windows on this roof slope, notably where the neighbours are closest. And windows here would be similar to the windows below, but set back further. So less of an opportunity for overlooking to the immediate neighbours because the angle of viewing would not allow for it. Obviously, the roof massing is increasing, so there would be an impact on outlook and light to all nearby residential properties, but the increased ridge height would not be particularly intrusive, and this impact is not considered to be materially harmful. Now, that's set out in more detail at paragraph 7.5.2 to 7.5.10. In terms of the standard of accommodation, all the units would meet the London Plan requirements for internal area and provision of private amenity space. The level of communal amenity space would be reduced, but for the reasons set out in the report and the mod sheet, officers do not consider this would warrant a refusal. Although I do have sympathy with the position of objectors who have a larger space, which would be reduced to a smaller space. However, it's not something that planning policy could reasonably raise an objection on. Subject to conditions and legal agreements, all other planning matters are considered to be acceptable. Therefore, the recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions and Section 106, and the additional condition in the mod sheet to secure a landscaping plan for the planting and furniture that would be provided in the two amenity areas. Members may also wish to consider, in the event that permission is granted, whether a condition to secure Swift boxes should also be imposed, as was suggested by one of the members. Thank you, Chair. And I will just stop sharing my
Thank you
screen.
very much, Tim, for that very helpful and detailed presentation, particularly your overview as well. So what we're going to do now is take some speakers. So on my order list here, I've got Lee Briggs and then Tim Goodwin. Can you identify yourself? Amazing, good. So Lee, can you kick us off with 3 minutes, please?
Thank you. To introduce myself, I'm one of the 3 directors for the residence management company at Burlington Gate. This was established in the 90s once the building first became occupied. In the years since, the freeholder has had no involvement in the management of the building, and for that I'm including his absence during major repairs. This applicant, who received the freehold from his father, is almost completely unknown to us. Despite this, he has expressed some very strong views about areas of the building being underutilised, and these opinions, despite being unevidenced, are included in the officer's report. What I would like to do today is provide some details about Burlington Gate that aren't in the report. The large block consists of 24 apartments, which are a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom. The 1 bedrooms measure 45 square metres and around 55 square metres for the 2s. None of these flats have balconies or private outdoor space of any kind. Some of the flats are single aspect. Ceiling heights are below 230, with the top floor flats also having enclosed structural elements below their ceiling level. You should all recognise this is substantially below the minimum standards for new builds in London today. What we do have is a communal roof space, which was heavily promoted in the original marketing of the building. Many decided to live here because of this feature. The communal space works out to 7 square metres per flat, and under this proposal that would reduce to just 2.5 square metres. I wish to be clear about what you're being asked to approve. In order to create 3 new flats that comply with the minimum standards, they would modify a building of 24 flats, which are already below those standards, and substantially worsen the quality of accommodation for the existing residents. I do not believe that anyone who wrote those standards did so intending for this to be the outcome. Some of you may have contributed to the development, so you can ask yourselves that question. Our outdoor spaces matter. At Burlington Gate right now, we have more young children living there than I can remember. We're in an area blessed with great primary schools, and in London, housing like this is where young families need to live. The applicant's offer to comprehensively landscape thin strips of bordering land and a gap by the bins do not come close to replacing the facility that will be lost. He has also never engaged with residents on this matter. You should reject this application on the basis of policy DMD2 of Merton's Adopted Sites and Policies Plan and London Plan Policy D6. This proposal will greatly impact the standard of living for existing residents, and with that impact falling on homes already below today's London standards. The underlying intent of those standards and how they are applied when modifying existing homes should be considered and perhaps clarified in another setting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now have Tim?
Forgive me if I'm nervous, I've not done this before. Burlington Gate is a community of 34 flats with around 66 residents. We share a communal space, a large roof terrace on top of 1 block accessible to all. We see this as our back garden. Coffee in the conservatory, a family lunch on the deck, greeting new neighbors, doing Pilates, or finding a corner to relax. This space promotes our well-being. It benefits our physical health, social health, emotional health, and importantly, our mental health. It was actually the Prime Minister of New Zealand who at Davos in 2019 stated, "Leaders need to address the societal well-being of our nation, not just the economic well-being." However, we believe that the freeholder's plans to construct 3 flats on our roof terrace would seriously affect the well-being of residents. He would be taking away more than half our back garden and many of the things we enjoy and use it for. He would be doing this very much against our will. In an email to Lee, the director, the previous case officer Tony Smith said, "I have encouraged the applicant to review the objections from residents and engage with them in any future developments, given the level of interest in this application." Sadly, the freeholder has never communicated with any of us on anything to do with this application. Both myself and Lee have attempted to communicate regularly with all our residents. They strongly object to this application. We represent them here today in this important democratic forum. The freeholder has offered to compensate us for the roof terrace by what he calls landscaping of 2 ground level areas. However, this is a hoax. One area is tiny, set next to 6 huge bins and looks directly into neighbours' property. The other is a sliver of land, very dark, directly under windows and next to the car park. Both would invade privacy, probably be noisy, even create hostility and threaten harmony among neighbours. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what matters more? The nurturing and sustaining of our community life, fostering the relationships of 66 residents, supporting their well-being, keeping our back garden, or crushing it for the sake of just 3 flats?
Thank you very much. And you didn't show at all you were nervous, so thank you. Can I get John English now to respond? John,
Thank you, Chair.
we've got 6 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. The application before you this evening has been the result of a lot of hard work on behalf of the applicant and your officers, with the first request for pre-application advice dating back to March 2020. The feedback from that advice was that a permitted development application was the best way to proceed. As you'll see from the officer's report and the addendum sheet, that application was refused due to some confusion over the date that the building was constructed. That issue has now been clarified, and the building that is on site today was constructed in the early 90s and therefore could be considered under the PD regulations. However, instead of submitting another PD application that was considered acceptable or appealing the refusal, the applicants wanted to address the concerns raised by the residents during the consultation period. The main concerns being the loss of amenity space and the accessibility of that space. Therefore, following further pre-application discussions with your officers, a full planning application was submitted that not only re-provides the rooftop amenity space, but also provides good ground floor amenity space that is accessible for all residents. The current rooftop provides approximately 146 square meters of space. However, you also need to consider the quality of that space in addition to its size. The existing space is not accessible by all residents, and it does not look like it's well maintained. Rubbish has been stored under the raised decks. The paving slabs are cracked. The furniture is rusty and dirty. The timber decking and steps are rotting and represents a hazard for many reasons. It generally looks like quite bleak and not really a space that you'd want to spend much time. With respect to the conservatory, this is nearly 30 years old, and structures of this nature only normally have a 20 to 25-year life expectancy if maintained. Again, this is currently dirty, covered in cobwebs and moldy. The guttering is leaking, and the seals on the window appear to be breaking. The structures of this age are incredibly inefficient, as I'm sure we've all experienced. They're like saunas in the summer, to the extent where they're not usable, and freezers in the winter, not particularly present. It also must cost a fortune to heat in the winter, with all of the heat from the building escaping through the perspex roof, which again is a concern given the current energy crisis. This application will put 2 new additional layers of insulation on the building, significantly improving the thermal efficiency of the building, keeping the building cooler during the heat wave and they're using less energy during the cooler months. The application also re-provides 83 square meters of top roof space amenity, creating new, modern, and more inviting space, and is significantly improving what is there at the moment. In addition to the plans also propose to refurbish unutilized areas of the site and provide new ground floor amenity on the side of the southern block. As you can see from the photos, it is a good sized area and brighter than the residents would suggest. The plans propose to significantly improve this, providing covered areas and additional seating. It also presents an opportunity to provide a different kind of amenity to what is on the roof, with shade that is accessible by all residents. Therefore, while there is a slight decrease in the size of the rooftop amenity space, there will be an overall improvement in the quality and quantity of medium space on the site and the quality of the site in general with additional landscaping. It's important to note that the reprovision of this space and the levels of amenity proposed are fully policy compliant. With respect to daylight and sunlight, our RICS chartered surveyor has undertaken a detailed assessment of the existing and proposed buildings. His expert opinion set out in both of his reports confirmed that the proposed schemes would not have any adverse effect with respect to daylight and sunlight of any of the existing surrounding or new residents. With respect to the other issues, these have all been thoroughly assessed by your officers during the 2 years the applicant has been working with them on this scheme. They're set out in detail in the officer's report and the addendum sheet, and concludes that the application is fully complies with all of the council's and the London Mayor's planning policy guidance. With respect to the standard of accommodation, they are all good size units with private balconies and are fully compliant. With respect to visual impact, the scheme has been designed to extend the mono pitch of the roof to reduce the impact. As you can see from the photographs, the conservatory is not visible from the ground. The height of the new ridge would only be 400 millimeters above the ridge of the conservatory. This site is a previously developed brownfield site in a sustainable location. The application proposes to make the most efficient use of this site, providing much needed residential accommodation, helping the council to fulfill its housing requirements. It therefore accords with planning policy guidance on all levels, and I would respectfully request that members support their officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We have Councillor Anthony Fairclough online. Anthony, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I've been asked to speak on this application in my capacity as ward councillor by the residents of Burlington Gate and also some other neighbouring residents. Tonight, I would like to ask committee members to vote against this application. Now, residents raise a number of challenges, including height, massing, and fears about the density of development in the area. And there's questions about the vague landscaping of the sort of spaces down the side of the property. But I want to talk about the impact this has on the existing residents' quality of life, and also the potential experience that people in these new flats would have. Originally, the applicant sought to bring a similar application through prior approval, as we've heard, and this was refused in February 2021. Now, as committee members will know, prior approval of permitted development gives the applicant some freedom to ignore some of the rules around housing standards. And unfortunately, my view is that we still see much of this thinking in this application, even though it's for full planning permission. Now, I want to quote part of the reasoning in the refusal for the prior approval. The proposed development, by reason of the loss of significant external amenity provision, would result in a detrimental impact to the enjoyment of the existing residents' amenity, contrary to DMD2 and DMD3 of the adopted sites and policies plan. So despite what we've heard, the prior approval, which this is said to be similar to, was actually, there was a substantive reason given for the refusal on grounds of loss of amenity. I think that we could say the same about this application. And this is the planning ground for rejecting the application that I invite the committee to consider. It will make all the flats in these blocks significantly poorer quality, and the 3 new flats will be without significant amenity space. I find the phrase amenity provision rather a cold phrase for what we mean here, and I would like to paint a picture that adds to what Lee and Tim have already said of the reality of the proposed. The officer's report describes a roof terrace, but as you've heard, there's actually an all-weather conservatory or rooftop room plus an outdoor terrace. And this is regularly used by residents and can fit 4 or 5 separate groups. Now, during lockdown, this was key. It was an extra working space, somewhere for children to play, a place to read, a place just to get away from things. It's a communal living area, an extension of people's living rooms. And as Tim said, this might very well be what made people want to move here when they came around to view it before buying or renting. Now, the application would reduce the terrace by about half and would remove that rooftop roof. So I would like to invite the committee to consider the requirements of CS14 on design, and as mentioned, DMD2 and DMD3 and Sites and Policies Plan, respectively design and alterations to existing buildings. DMD3 provides for protection of amenity. Both DMD2 and DMD3 reference Merton's design SPD as providing further detailed guidance. The SPD itself provides at para 8.5 that new development needs to respect the amenities of neighbouring properties. These amenities are of particular importance where the neighbouring use is residential. In 7.74 of the officer's report, a per capita figure of amenity space is given for the entire building. But that's not including the fact that the existing terrace and rooftop room are accessible by all the residents in both buildings. You've already heard the residents tonight flesh out the impact that these changes will have on them. And I think that's the evidence for you on their suffering detrimental impact. And I hope you will use that to take the opportunity to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask, is it Tim? Oh, sorry. Is it Tim online who can come back on some of those points? I've also got some notes I've taken. I may jump in if I don't hear a sort of a reflection.
Yes, that's right, Chair. I can come back on some points, not an awful lot. I just want to clarify the position on the roof terrace and the size of it. So the current roof terrace is 146 square meters. The proposed roof terrace would be 83 square meters, but with benches and planting. The area to the side is around 50 odd square meters. Now, the block to the northern part of the site has an additional amenity space to the rear of it. I appreciate that this roof terrace is available to those occupiers as well. But looking at a breakdown of the number of units in the larger building, which is currently 24 and would become 27, it wouldn't be 2.5 square meters per flat. It would be 3.07, but that's only if you don't include the side area. If you just look at the roof terrace, looking at the side area and the roof terrace, it would equate to 5 square meters per flat. The London plan doesn't give standards on communal amenity space. It simply provides standards on children's play space. So were this a new development, it would be required to provide 32 square meters children's play space. There's no definitive level of communal amenity space. However, this would equate to the same as the minimum requirement for private amenity space. And therefore, officers don't feel that there is a planning justification for refusal on this ground. In terms of the previous application, the prior approval, there are some elements of normal planning assessment that don't apply to prior approval. However, critically, the impact on visual amenity, neighbouring amenity, and the internal space standards all do apply to prior approval applications. The space standards didn't originally apply, but the legislation has since been amended. The previous application didn't re-provide a roof terrace. It was simply a flat roof above, and the entirety of the roof terrace would have been removed. So just as a bit of further background to the reason for refusal on that previous application. In terms of the level of amenity space that the new proposed flats would have, they are all in excess, albeit marginally, of the standards of the London plan. So the 5 square meters, and one of them has 2 balconies, so 10. Those are all my observations and comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tim. I've got 1 or 2 questions on this, but I'm going to open it to the floor first to colleagues. Are there any particular questions you want to ask Tim? So we've got 1. Anyone else in this round? I'll take the next one, Susie.
Sorry, this is a question for Tim. Could you put back up the photograph of the strip to the side, the shady area described as shady?
Yes, 1 moment. Okay, hopefully you can see that now.
I can. So you've got the building on one side. You've got, how wide is that? 6 feet?
No, I don't have a measurement immediately to hand. I can get one throughout the course of the discussion. I'd say it's probably more like 8 or 9 feet, but around that sort of amount. But I don't have an actual figure.
And what's on the other side of that fence?
So these are the backs of gardens, and then houses beyond.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, my question, Tim, was more about your advice on the discharge of conditions and planning, because from the sort of passionate discussion that Ellie and Tim talked to us about, obviously there's an amenity space there they've got an idea or a view on. You know, how do these conditions get discharged in the sense of the involvement of residents in a community like this? And obviously the applicant is listening to this, regardless of the answer, so to speak.
Okay, well, the applicant would be required to provide a landscaping plan that would show the layout, the planting, any furniture to be included in the roof terrace. So it's to secure the details which have been shown indicatively at this stage, but it's to make sure that the space is actually improved in terms of its character and appearance, and to ensure that it's a high quality area. In terms of notification of neighbours, this isn't generally done for condition discharge applications, but the intention is to ensure that the planting and furniture, as shown indicatively, is followed through to the actual finished product. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And can I just also understand the accessibility of that rooftop terrace? What is there a guarantee of access being provided in either informally or formally? Can you just outline that a bit further?
So all the units which currently have access to it would have access to the rooftop terrace as existing.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, yes, Nick, anyone else? Stuart, next.
So just for clarification, currently not all units have access to the roof terrace.
No, all units currently have access. So that's from both buildings. The building to the north also has another amenity space, a garden area to the rear. But all the flats within the gated site have access to the roof terrace, even if they're not within that building. And that would be the same in the proposed arrangement.
Cool. And sorry, Stuart.
Well, thank you. Just going through what's happening with the roof terrace and in terms of the space that's changing. At the moment, you said before it was going from 146 square meters to 83. What exactly, can you just give me a list of the things that the residents are meant to be getting in exchange for that loss? I know you mentioned this side garden and some cycle space, but are those the only two things the residents are getting in that trade?
Well, there is cycle parking and bin storage, primarily to meet the needs of the new flats. There is landscaping works and improvement to a lot of the boundary walls and fences. And then in addition to that, it's the refurbishment of the side area and provision of a meaningful roof terrace with some facilities. So the existing roof terrace has a couple of chairs and tables on top, but it isn't landscaped in the same way that the proposed would be.
I think Stuart wants to come back on that one.
Yeah, just one quick question. What is kind of the longer term provision for the maintenance of that roof terrace? Is it just kind of they're going to plant things and then that's just it and their job is done, or is there going to be longer term support to maintain that new area?
Well, the landscaping condition that we can put on, as is similar to other landscaping conditions, we can't reasonably ask for more than 5 years worth of management. But that landscaping layout must be maintained for 5 years and maintained in order to not breach that condition. So it's beyond 5 years, you know, we wouldn't have control over it, but for certainly the short term, it would be required to provide everything that the condition is signed off on.
Thank you. And then Susie, last point, and then general observation and condition.
Sorry, just one last one, Tim. The little patch of land to the north, which you've been talking about as additional space used by the second block, isn't used that way at the moment. It hasn't been landscaped. It's just a scrap of land out the back. Am I right?
Yes, that's a fair description. It's not landscaped in that sense, but it is the bit of land that goes adjacent to that, which, you know, could potentially be used as amenity space, or is used as amenity space.
And if it isn't, we're looking at 37 people using the 83 square meters of the roof terrace if these little patches of land aren't adequate?
Well, it would be a combination of the three, I think would be fair to say. You'd have a more shady, potentially cool retreat on the side area, a more open roof terrace, and then this other area, but I can't absolutely comment on how residents would use it, but those areas are there and available to be used.
Thank you.
Sorry, Tim, just to come back on Susie's point, actually, has there been any discussions with the applicant about landscape in that particular bit of the plot?
The area to the north, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Bear with me for just a moment. I believe there is a reference to some refurbishment of this area, but I just want to check that out before I confirm that. It shouldn't take more than 30 seconds.
No worries, take your time. It's important to get it right.
Sorry,
Okay, so
Chair, if it helps, it is identified on the site plan that that area will be re-landscaped if Tim wants to get the site plan up. And the area to the side is 16 feet wide, if that helps.
thank you.
Thank you.
One step ahead of me. Members, if you can see the site plan, if I zoom in, so you can see newly refurbished landscaped area here. Bin stores provided here. So it's more landscape into the boundary. And this boundary fence is also to be replaced as confirmed by the agent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any general comments or additions, points colleagues want to make on this? Susie?
Sorry, have we reached the stage of observations? I am very unhappy about the loss of amenity to people who already live in these flats. And I think that picture of the strip at the side, which is described variously as shady, demonstrates the unlikeliness of it being used. It's between the side of a huge block and a fence, and it's maybe 12 feet wide. If you take that out, because these figures only work if that forms part of it, you find yourself in a situation where, as if these 3 flats are built on a block where people are living in tiny flats, smaller than would now be allowed and without balconies. If you do that, you have an 83 square meter space within which, if this were being built from the beginning, there would need to be 32 square meters of dedicated play space. Doesn't need to be done because this is a late addition and the rules have changed. But in reality, children do need somewhere to play, and there are a lot of children in this block, we have heard. So if you look at the figures again, you've got your 83 square meters. If you take off the 32, which the children should have to play in, then you have 51 square meters. And if you have 37 people with access to that, we're looking at less than 1.5 square meters per person. That, I think, is shocking when there is so little else available. So I am going to vote against this on the basis that the loss of amenity is too great under DND 2 and 3.
Okay.
Can I add one more comment? Forgive me. It's probably irrelevant that the developer is elsewhere, but if this were to be developed into 2 flats, it could be done without all the other residents losing their amenity space. It is only because it is being developed to the maximum for profit that the people who live there are going to lose out so severely if we grant this application.
I think on your latter point, it's difficult to strategize that, but I understand the point you're making. Does anyone else want to have a comment or general observation on this one? Ed.
Thank you, Chair. I find myself agreeing with Councillor Susie Hicks. The loss of amenity space is quite concerning. Another factor coming from over 3 decades of selling properties like this, one of those things is a lot of people pay quite a premium to live on the top floor for various reasons. And I think to suddenly find people there and having another floor put on top of them is very difficult. And I think we found this during COVID when people realized the importance of space, amenity space, as Susie has mentioned. And I think some of those poor people that have paid top dollar to live on the top many years thinking no one will ever be above them are suddenly going to have somebody walking around on the top. Whatever the insulation will be, you'll still hear them if you want quietness and didn't expect it and you've been used to it. And then to have your amenity space cut down is, yeah, I find it very difficult to vote with this. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, we've heard a lot of arguments. We've heard the concerns of residents about loss of amenity. We've also heard from the applicant the pledges they've made and additional points they've made. Also heard about the concerns of the cost of living crisis with additional insulation as well. So we are now going to put this to a vote as in the order paper. So officers have recommended we approve this application. All those in favour of approval, please raise your hands. All those for chair, all those against? 5. The application is denied. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to need a planning reason for that refusal.
Yes, Chairman, could I just come in there? Actually?
Sure, go for it.
What I'm hearing is there's a clear issue, which is a very relevant planning consideration about the amount of amenity space. May I suggest to residents there's a proposed, sorry, to members, there's a proposed development here of additional residential accommodation. May I suggest that what members would like us to put on the decision notice is the extent of that development is disproportionate to the amount of amenity space that would then be left for the development as a whole, if that sounds acceptable to you, Chairman.
Can we just formalise that with a vote in favour so we're aware of that? So all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh.
Nine,
Yeah.
Chairman, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we're going to move on to our next application. Those who may wish to leave may do so now. So we are moving to item P3286, so that's 9 Hamilton Road. So it's a conversion and Tim Bryson will introduce this one. Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to share my screen, bear with me. Members, the application site is at 9 Hamilton Road. In Wimbledon. The site is one of the closest residential roads to the South London Tube Station. The building on the house on site is technically detached, albeit by a small gap to the neighbouring property. The site surroundings are residential. The proposal itself, so the proposal is to seek consent for additional single-storey rear extension in the northeast corner of the property, and also to convert it to 3 flats. And you'll see in the planning history that a number of certificates of lawfulness and a planning permission has been issued and granted, and these have been implemented on site. And you'll see that in some of my own site photographs when I visited the site. So the existing house, as outlined before, so we have at ground floor level, extensions here, open plan living, first floor bedrooms and top floor bedrooms as well. The building itself so has been rendered with new windows throughout which have grey frames. As outlined previously, sort of the roof extensions have been done under the certificate of lawfulness application, and the ground floor side extension under a planning permission, and also the ground floor rear extension under another certificate of lawfulness application. There is an outbuilding on site, again, which was granted under certificate of lawfulness application, which is part of this application in terms of its use, which would be ancillary to the ground floor flat proposed. So turning to the proposal itself, access would be down the side of the building, where you would enter into the communal hallway. Then you would enter into the ground floor 3-bedroom flat with bedroom here, bedroom on the side here, and an open plan living space at the back, with the additional extension sought, which is to square off this part of the building. Moving into first floor level would be a one-bedroom flat in a very simplistic layout, with a bedroom at the front, bathroom and open plan living at the rear, and then at top floor level would be a small studio flat here. So with the elevations, really some of the key aspects is this corner infill here. Members will note the application date, the valid date for the application has been in some time. So on site visit, the works have been undertaken and carried out in terms of the extensions to the building itself. Bin and cycle storage would be provided at the front of the property. The council's waste officer is happy with the bin storage proposal for the 3 flats. It should be noted, members, that the cycle facility at the front provides for 3 cycle spaces. An additional cycle space will be provided within the outbuilding for the ground floor 3-bedroom unit. So turning to site photographs, so as outlined previously, a number of extensions have been done to the property already, including the re-render and new windows throughout. So looking at the property from the back, you have the roof extension up here, the first floor side extension, and the ground floor extension here. As outlined previously, this is the area which now requires planning permission in terms of the extensions and form. This is the outbuilding at the back of the site, and the outdoor space. The outdoor space would be primarily for the ground floor 3-bedroom unit only. And this is the view from the back, really looking at the building. It should be noted that the neighbouring properties aren't rendered, but you can render your house without needing planning permission unless you're in a conservation area. In terms of the windows as well, you can replace them with different coloured frame windows without planning permission, and the re-roof with slate has occurred. So members, I draw attention to some of the modification sheet where some queries are raised at the technical briefing and answers to them. But overall, officers recommend permission be granted, subject to conditions and the legal agreement restricting it to be permit-free. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was very helpful. So we do have an objector to speak on this one. We've got Adam Wood. Is Adam here? Thank you very much, Adam. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm representing several houses on Hamilton Road today, and we absolutely recognise the need for modernisation, development and affordable housing on the road. But that shouldn't mean compromising the safety and well-being of prospective tenants and neighbours. The first thing to say is there's already paying tenants living at number 9. Furthermore, it is our understanding that the circumstances of the ground floor flats qualify as a house of multiple occupation. No HMO licence has been granted, and this application does nothing to remedy that. So the safety and the well-being of the tenants is key here. Typical terrace houses in the Battles, including number 9, are not fit for purpose as a 3-bed flat. 2, yes, as in the case of number 7, 3, not at all. Case in point with that top floor flat in number 9, you'll see in the floor plan, you have pitched windows at the front of the house facing into enclosed storage space, not living space. The tenant has no clear view out of that flat. The windows at the back are misted, obscured for privacy reasons with the neighbors. There is a far bigger implication though, and that is one of safety. If there is a fire on either of the two bottom flats and those stairs become impassable, they're reasonably the only good exit. You can't go out the back windows because they're floor to ceiling windows, as I covered previously, and you can't climb through that storage in case of smoke or in case of low visibility. At the very least, a site visit should be made to confirm it is safe for tenants. We're also worried around further development of that site. This will be the 6th planning application in 2 years, not including those withdrawn. Given this incremental scope creep, we have a real worry about that outbuilding or so-called games room in previous applications. It's clear that the intention is to make that a studio flat as well. That's evidenced by the standalone gate with key code lock that's on there now, and with sheet roof extending out from the outbuilding, again, which is not in the planning application. To confirm our suspicions, there's a better frame visible from the window currently in said space. The floor space is too small to accommodate a standalone dwelling there, and it's in contravention with the London plan as a result. So we're putting that aspect on record now. This other flat really exacerbates issues around amenities in terms of the bins, the waste, the vermin that come from that. And also in terms of parking, 2 additional spaces would be needed, but the plan doesn't show that with the bins and with the cycle store, that you're probably going to need 3 with the difficulty to park in that driveway. The houses have long held reservations on the size and the proportions and the development. The height of the extension, we believe, is above 2.85. We think the length of the extension is beyond 4 meters, but there hasn't been a site visit to confirm that. You can see from the pictures, it is very out of character with the other houses surrounding it, to put it lightly, and that's not just from a render perspective as well. It is hugely overbearing, particularly from number 7 next door. So on that basis, we feel this application should be rejected, and at the very least, a site visit should be made to check on the safety of prospective tenants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got down here that the agent may be speaking. Can I just confirm if they're in the room or online? I've not had details of their name. No? Okay. So they're not here to speak. So we'll go now to Councillor Mike Brunt, who's online. Mike.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I apologise for the quality of the lighting. I'm currently on holiday in South Africa and we're having load shedding, so I'm in the middle of a power cut. But hopefully the battery will last long enough for me to speak and contribute. The reason I'm breaking off from my leave to speak on this is because I'm so concerned about this application. There's, as Adam's just referred to, and I've been asked by a number of neighbours to speak tonight, there is a substantial building at the bottom of the garden already, which there is concern that that is going to be turned into a dwelling. But actually, if you look at the size of the extension from the house, which does exceed the maximum, as I understand it, and is over 3 meters tall on the neighbour's side, number 11. Now, I understand that boundaries can change slightly, and if the land is slightly higher on one side, you measure it from the side of the development, but the land's flat there. So how can that be the case, that the extension is so high? And the gap between the end of the extension and the structure at the bottom of the garden is, I understand, something in the order of 3 meters. So we've got certainly 3 dwellings proposed with only a 3 meter length garden at the end, and that is below the minimum, as I understand, for amenity space and garden space for a property. I'm very concerned that there's not been a site visit to really go into these details and consider what the points that have been raised by objectors. And Abbey Ward, as I mentioned in a previous contribution to another planning application, Abbey Ward is contributing considerably to the housing need of the borough. The redevelopments that are going on in the High Path estate are adding a lot of houses and dwellings to the borough's.
We'll just wait 1 second for Mike, see if he comes back. Okay. I think we've lost Mike, but I think I would say if he was on, absolute bonus points for calling us in during a blackout from South Africa. I think we need a chart to list the sort of furthest callers in to us. Tim, I've taken some points down. It'd be good to hear some reflections on what you've heard as well. I mean, particularly we've got potential enforcement issue here with the height of the existing buildings, but also understanding amenity space. And there's definitely an issue discussed about fire from the resident. It'd be great to hear some more on your reflections. And also, was there or was there not a site visit done by officers as part of this application?
Thank you, Chair. Yes,
Hello?
Some of the issues raised. So I think HMO was raised, no license, but so house and multiple occupation only needs planning permission above 6 occupancies. The licensing scheduling is separate from planning in any event. But that's not what is proposed here. What is proposed is for 3 separate flats, and that is what would be granted this evening. With regards to fire safety, this ultimately is governed by building control, and the building's not of a height where we would require a fire safety statement as part of a planning application. The outbuilding is to be used in conjunction with the ground floor flat. That's part of the application, and we have conditioned that, which I think is number 6, to restrict its use there. So any independent occupancy of that outbuilding would be in breach of that condition. Parking was raised. We are restricting 2 of the units to be permit free, so they can't apply for parking permits. So the parking permits will only be available for the ground floor flat. In terms of the height of the extensions, I have been to visit the site myself to have a look closely at this one. The extensions would appear to be in accordance with the plans previously under the previous applications. The height is taken from the site itself. And in terms of the outdoor amenity space, Chair, that is a matter of judgment this evening. So it is a shortfall in the application. You'll see that in the officer's report that the 2 flats at first floor and second floor don't have outdoor space. It is difficult with conversions of older properties because there is overlooking issues when it comes to adding balconies artificially to properties such as this. So it is a balanced judgment we have to make, and you'll see that within our report. Thank you, Chair.
Tim, thank you very much for that. It's helpful to reflect on that. So colleagues, I'm going to open up to questions. A round of 3. Martin, anyone else hands up? Susie, and I may have a question too. Martin.
I just have a question in relation to ancillary residential accommodation in terms of the existing outbuilding and the condition in terms of number 6. What purposes would be deemed ancillary? Could you slightly expand on that, please?
Susie?
You asking for me? The one thing about this application which particularly concerns me is the tiny garden. And I was just wondering about the extent to which the proposed extension, which is relatively small compared to what the new one that's already there, what difference it was going to make in terms of the garden.
Yeah, and I've just got Martin's taken my first question, but actually just understand a bit more about cycle storage, because this application has a no permit constraint put on it. We've heard before about space at the front of the property. How does where does cycle storage play into this, particularly thinking about multiple occupancy of rooms, etc., etc.? So just sort of rounding up, you've got my question obviously about bike storage, Susie's about the tiny garden, and how does that play out with the other 2 apartments, and the ancillary outbuilding. So condition 6, what are the conditions that are permitted?
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to condition 6, ancillary means sort of associated with the ground floor flat. So it can include living accommodation, so it could be used for home office, but also a bedroom. But that is the sort of standard condition for controlling the use of such a building, so that it can't be let out or sold independently as a separate unit. In terms of the difference, so in the report, I think the dimensions have been put in about the actual size of the additional extension of extra 1.5 meters deep and 1.2 meters wide. So it is very small additional take up, and I think the level of outdoor space for the 3-bed flat is compliant with our policies. So we do have a bit of a difference between providing new houses where it's 50 square meters, whereas for flats it's 5 square meters and plus additional square meter per occupant. So the actual, although it's small, with the outbuilding present there, it is actually compliant as a flat. Chair, in terms of cycle storage, so they're providing the minimum standards in the London plan. That's what's proposed, and the car parking permit free agreement doesn't have any bearing on that. So that's the standard proposed, which is 1 per 1-bed flat, and then 2 for I think it's 2 plus bedrooms.
Thank you very much, Tim. Do we have another round of questions at all? No? Okay. Now on to comments and observations. Does anyone want to kick us off? Jill.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting because now, having seen the sort of the rendering, the photographs, as it were, of the rear where the extensions are going to be, I'm concerned that we're setting potentially a pattern here of accepting this kind of density of development in these kind of homes and areas. And to be perfectly honest with you, I find the development, the design quite shockingly bad. And I know that really is no reason for not granting an application, but it does rather begin to make it look like a shanty town at the rear. And if we let this one through, how many others are we going to potentially let through on this basis? So it feels like we're squishing an awful lot of extra bodies into a very small space. And I don't know personally enough to know whether that density really is acceptable, whether it's pushing the limits of what's acceptable, or are they perfectly within the scope of what is acceptable. So I guess it's more of an observation than a question.
Thank you, Jill. Is there anyone else? I mean, minor reflections on that would be, I would, officers would bring to our attention if the size and shape and design is not in keeping with the London plan. Otherwise, why would it come to this committee in the first place? And secondly, that the reality is, if we even Google Street View or satellite view the area, at your point, Jill, about commencing a sort of avalanche of applications to sort, several have outbuildings, several have loft conversions, but I think you made your point very well. Is there anyone else want to add points? No? Susie.
I have to say I share some of Councillor Manley's concerns, but having looked at it, the difference between what's proposed and what's being built already is tiny. And because of that, if this were coming before us from the beginning, everything that Councillor Manley says, I would entirely endorse. But because we're looking at a tiny difference, which will still make a difference in availability of accommodation, which is so desperately needed, on balance, I am going to vote for this, despite the small garden, because it is such a small adjustment.
Thank you for that addition to the debate. Okay, so we'll move on to the vote itself. So I'm going to ask all those voting against the officer's proposal to recommend this scheme, please raise your hands.
Madam Chairman.
All those not voting? All those in favour of the application?
Unanimous, Chairman, 9.
Thank you very much. So all those who are here for this application may depart. I've been asked for a slightly earlier break. So we're going to take a 10-minute break and come back at 20.